Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
It's going to take you live to Dublin, where that news conference between Donald Tusk and Leo Varadkar is taking place. Let's have a listen in.
I really want to thank you on behalf of the Irish government and the Irish people for your very strong and effective leadership as President of the European Council, and in particular the enormous focus and solidarity that Ireland has experienced in the context of these Brexit negotiations. We really appreciate the solidarity from all of our EU partners, from the EU institutions and also the other member states who have taken Ireland's unique concerns to heart. And Irish concerns are very much Europe's concerns. It's an important and impressive display of European unity and solidarity. The European Union is a family, and families stick together. In the guidelines that were agreed last April, those unique concerns, maintaining the common travel area and all of the rights associated with it, protecting the Good Friday Agreement and the gains of the peace process, and avoiding a hard border, were acknowledged as priority issues for the withdrawal negotiations and the withdrawal treaty, along also with the United Kingdom's financial commitment and EU citizen rights, the rights of EU citizens remaining in the UK and of course UK citizens in the European Union. We agreed at that point that sufficient progress would be required on all three of these issues before we could move on to the second phase of the negotiations, which will consider the future framework for the new relationship between the European Union and the United Kingdom after the UK leaves. In 2 weeks' time, Donald will chair a crucial meeting of the 27 EU leaders at which we will decide formally whether or not the sufficient progress test has been met, and that will be a critical decision point. There has been some good progress in relation to the UK financial settlement and also EU citizen rights. And these issues are crucial for all EU member states, including, of course, Ireland. And I very much hope that the work that remains to be done can be completed in time. On the issues that are specific to Ireland, there has been some good progress, particularly in relation to the common travel area and all the rights associated with it, and towards a common understanding of what's needed to protect the Good Friday Agreement in all its parts, including, of course, and crucially, avoiding a hard border. On the question of the border, as I've said many times, the best and most obvious solution would be for the United Kingdom to remain in the customs union and the single market. But as the British government has ruled that option out, it must offer credible, concrete and workable solutions that guarantee that there will be no hard border, whatever the outcome of the negotiations and whatever the future relationship between the EU and the UK is. We have to ensure that we avoid the risks posed by any potential regulatory divergence from the rules of the internal market and the customs union. And as we discussed today, the period between now and the European Council in 2 weeks' time will be crucial. Indeed, the next couple of days will be crucial. So we don't have long, but I believe with the right engagement and the right political will, we can reach an agreement on the way ahead. As I said before, I'm an optimist by nature, and I'm prepared to continue intensive work with the task force that's negotiating for the EU27 to secure a positive outcome, allowing us to move on to talks about the transition phase and the future relationship between the UK and the EU, which are so important for our trade and economic interests. However, I'm also prepared to stand firm with our partners if needs be, if the UK offer falls short on any of those three issues, including the Irish ones. We have worked in close partnership with successive UK governments to deliver and support the peace process, and the Good Friday Agreement is a legally binding international treaty and is the indispensable framework for relationships within Northern Ireland and on the island of Ireland and between the United Kingdom and Ireland. And as co-guarantor of that agreement, the government has consistently affirmed our unwavering commitment to it. The United Kingdom is our friend and our neighbour, and we want to work with the United Kingdom now. Similarly, we want to see relations on this island continue to develop peacefully and respectfully. And I know that Prime Minister May shares that commitment, but our government's approach in the negotiations must take account of the complexities presented by their decision to leave the Union. I want to make progress, but I also need to be clear. The EU27 can't declare sufficient progress without firm and acceptable commitments on the border. and that's a position that's shared across the political spectrum in Ireland. I want to thank Donald once again for his strong and consistent support, for his friendship towards Ireland, and for dealing so well with the unique challenges that face us throughout this process, and particularly for travelling to Dublin today to continue our discussions. So I'd like to invite President Tusk to make some remarks.
Good afternoon. Many thanks for your warm welcome to Dublin and for your Irish hospitality. It is no secret that we discuss Brexit with a special focus on the border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. I came to Dublin to reassure the Taoiseach and all the Irish people that the EU is fully behind you and your request that there should be no hard border on the island of Ireland after Brexit. The Irish request is the EU's request.
Well, we seem to have lost the sound there in Dublin. Just to reiterate some of the things that were highlighted there by the Irish Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar. He said that he wanted to maintain a common traveller area. They wanted to continue maintaining the Good Friday Agreement, as well as the border issue, as well as that financial arrangement. So we've got the sound back. Let's have a listen into what Mr Tusk is saying.
The border between Ireland and Northern Ireland is no longer a symbol of division. It is a symbol of cooperation. And we cannot allow Brexit to destroy this achievement of the Good Friday Agreement. It is the UK that started Brexit, and now it is their responsibility to propose a credible commitment to do what is necessary to avoid a hard border. It is clear that we cannot reach a full agreement on every single detail at this stage, especially that the final outcome will be linked to the future relations between the EU as a whole and the UK. As you know, I asked Prime Minister May to put a final offer on the table by the 4th of December so that we can assess whether sufficient progress can be made at the upcoming European Council. And we have agreed today that before proposing guidelines on transition and future relations to the leaders, I will consult the Taoiseach if the UK offer is sufficient for the Irish government. Let me say very clearly, if the UK offer is unacceptable for Ireland, it will also be unacceptable for the EU. I realise that for some British politicians this may be hard to understand, but such is the logic behind the fact that Ireland is the EU member while the UK is leaving. This is why the key to the UK's future lies, in some ways, in Dublin, at least as long as Brexit negotiations continue. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that was the Irish Taoiseach Leo Varadkar and the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk. Mr Tusk finishing off by saying that there was no secret that the two men had discussed Brexit, especially regarding the border issue between Ireland and Northern Ireland. He ended that news conference by saying if the arrangement, the deal between the UK and Ireland is unacceptable for Ireland, then it is also unacceptable for the European Union. So the two leaders are talking there in Dublin.
Well, let's move now from political turmoil on the other side of the Atlantic to a sharpening crisis back here. After talks with the Dublin government, the European Council President Donald Tusk said today the UK's future lies in some ways in Dublin. Just what Theresa May and her unionist allies wanted to hear. The problem, as we discussed last night, is that the Irish question is rather a tricky one, and we need an answer for it quickly.
They shook today on their own kind of Brexit deal, a pact that both will drive a hard bargain with Britain. The President of the European Council was here to show he walks shoulder to shoulder with the Irish Prime Minister.
address.
And when Donald Tusk signed the visitor book, he also put his name to a guarantee, as the pair reaffirmed that when it comes to Brexit talks, nobody moves on until Ireland's ready to.
If the UK offer is unacceptable for Ireland, it will also be unacceptable for the EU. I realise that for some British politicians this may be hard to understand. This is why the key to the UK's future lies, in some ways, in Dublin.
I want to make progress, but I also need to be clear. The EU27 can't declare sufficient progress without firm and acceptable commitments on the border.
That border with Northern Ireland will be the new frontier of the EU, and when Britain leaves, nobody wants checkpoints. But so far, no other solution's been agreed, and some worry none can be found.
It's a very practical problem, and at the moment we haven't yet seen a practical solution, which is why we call on the government to come forward with further proposals, because it has taken the decision to leave the customs union and the single market.
The Irish want Northern Ireland to stay in both, but the DUP won't stand for it. They'd rather bring down the government than bring in any special arrangements. Tonight, one of their MPs tweeted that Britain's Brexit offer will still be implemented with or without the support of the EU and Republic of Ireland. We will not be blackmailed. But the Friday feeling among many in Dublin is that it's Britain making too many demands.
England decided to leave the EU, not Ireland, so we have to mind ourselves rather than thinking of what England wants.
Everybody's kind of naive, especially the British at the moment are naive at what's actually the implications of them leaving.
I think that the EU is meant to be like democratic, so I don't think that the EU should come over here and try and make Ireland, you know, against Britain at all.
There are just days to talk things out if negotiations are to progress to trade. And tonight, these two left with a deal that won't make Britain's any easier.
And Paul joins us now from Dublin. Paul, look, as you say, the border's a massive issue, but Ireland does a lot of trade with the UK, and it's pretty clear that if they veto this, you know, it's possible it might torpedo any possibility of a deal. Are they really going to do it, do you think?
Well, look, Tom, they couldn't sound any more serious about it, could they? And I don't think they'll necessarily need to. It sounds as if the rest of the EU are quite willing to veto this deal for them. You know, if for centuries Ireland has been at the behest of Britain's will, well, incredibly tonight the EU is saying our future is now in Dublin's hands. An incendiary claim for Donald Tusk to have made this afternoon. It has enraged Brexiteers, as you would have expected, but they feel the onus is on us to come up with solutions on the border to convince Ireland that they will work. After all, we are the ones who have chosen to leave the EU. The Taoiseach suggested today that some progress has been made on the border, on the freedom of movement across the border in what's known as the Common Travel Area, so perhaps there will be a series of small steps rather than one giant leap of faith on all of this. But Theresa May has got to get there by Monday when she sits down for lunch with EU leaders and has to agree this fixed menu of solutions on the border, on our Brexit bill and on the rights of EU citizens. Clearly it is the border that's the most stubborn issue now. Ireland may be our closest neighbour, but in Dublin tonight it really does feel as if we are worlds apart with no real solution about how to close that gulf.
OK, Paul, it's going to be a busy weekend. Thank you very much indeed.